Hello everyone, I'm Dan Murphy from Blue and Gold Illustrated. Joining me as always is our senior editor Lou Somogyi for another episode of This Month in Irish History. This will be our last month in Irish history before we go down to the weeks in Irish history as the football season gets started. But we'll go back 10 years this time, Lou. Just before the football season got started in 2004 as Notre Dame got going under their last season with Ty Willingham, it was athletic director Kevin White who was making the headlines for the team.
Yeah, Kevin White often is a popular target of some slings and arrows from the Notre Dame fandom. But one of the things he pointed out 10 years ago in an interview with USA Today was Notre Dame really had to get into some more realistic scheduling. Now, that didn't necessarily sit well with some people because the previous year there were three different teams ranked number 5 that Notre Dame played during the year. And Michigan beat them 38-0. Florida State beat them here 37-0. USC beat them by 31 for the third straight year. And then there were so many other games in Michigan State, Pittsburgh was ranked, etc. And the thing he pointed out is look at the top teams. Look at how they schedule more realistically as far as just getting in bye weeks before their biggest games, or also putting in, I don't want to say necessarily cupcakes, but something where you say, okay, that should be an automatic win. Sort of like Notre Dame with Rice this year. They started saying they wanted to get into that warm-up situation. San Diego State in 08, Nevada in 09, even though they had Colin Kaepernick at quarterback. I think people know what you mean by that. And everything.
South Florida, although that one didn't work out.
Oh yeah, that one didn't quite work as well. And you know what? That same year, in 2004, Michigan was supposed to be the opener. They moved the BYU game out there to the first one so that there could be a game before Michigan. Guess what? They lose to BYU out there, which kind of was the beginning of the end for the Tyrone Willingham era.
So obviously no guarantees. What was the general feeling when he made those statements about wanting to sort of ease up on the schedule? Were people excited, or was it Notre Dame's chickening out and not doing what they should?
I think it was a little of both. I mean, you're always going to have one faction that says, you gotta, just like Knute Rockne said, you have to play the best in order to be the best. But what's sometimes forgotten is Knute Rockne's schedules also had Lombard and Wabash kind of at the beginning of the schedule before getting into maybe some of the more media parts. And then there are others saying, yeah, it's about time that they start looking at it more realistically, because you look at Lou Holtz's team in 1990, you had 4 number 1 recruiting classes, plus you had a Hall of Fame coach there, but they finished 9-2 during the regular season because you had at Tennessee, at USC, Penn State. Those were consecutive games. Michigan State, Miami, and along the way, there's a residual effect where just week after week, when you take that kind of competition on, it's just extremely difficult to maintain a high.
Notre Dame started adding some lower tier FBS teams, still one of the 3 not to have any FCS. It was also sort of the driving force behind the Shamrock Series, Notre Dame's home away from home game that's become sort of a staple of the schedule, a way to get a kind of de facto 7th home game on their schedule every year.
Right, that was another goal, is that Notre Dame, it took a while before Notre Dame could get regularly into 6 home games. In '89, they played 5 during a 12-game regular season. So they get to 6, and the thought was, we should even really get to 7 because that's what everyone does. But as an independent, it's kind of difficult to have those non-return games. So it's like the compromise and the genesis of the Shamrock Series, I think, began then for saying, maybe if we go to a top city where we host the game, it becomes like a de facto home game.
Well, when you look at the teams Notre Dame has most recently added to its schedule, but with the ACC and adding teams like Texas and Georgia, some big-name programs, it looks like they're not so concerned with that anymore, especially with the college football playoff coming up where strength of schedule has become maybe a bigger deal than it was under the BCS. Do you expect them to go sort of lean back in the other direction going forward?
Yeah, it's the balance of that. Next year they play Texas at home, and then you conclude the season at Stanford. You have USC in between, and you also have a trip to Clemson. At the same time, you have games against Temple and Massachusetts where they say, okay, well, maybe those can provide the relief. So it's a difficult balancing act when they scheduled Georgia for 2017 and 19. Well, Texas was on for the 19 schedule there, and it's like, is there a way we can maybe move this to a later date with Texas? So it's a very difficult task to create that balance, one that I don't envy that Jack Swarbrick has to.
Notre Dame's schedules have never been easy. This year won't be any different. Brian Kelly at the team's media day called it the toughest in the country yesterday for us here in South Bend. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this issue in This Month in Irish History. We'll be here throughout the 2014 schedule bringing you your Notre Dame news. And until then, stay tuned to blueandgold.com.